morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Naina Acharya, your host for today. It is with immense pleasure I welcome all of you at the Business Across Border 2022, hosted by Dun Bradstreet, India. Before we begin, please allow me to share with you some fundamentals of the platform. You can choose to go full screen by clicking on the full screen button located on the bottom right corner of the center screen. In case your screen freezes, don't panic. It might be due to a drop in the internet connection. Please refresh your browser window and it should be fine. At this juncture, I would also like to inform our viewers that they are welcome to share their views and opinions on today's proceedings with us and on your social media channels. Please use the hashtags hashtag DNBBAB and hashtag GrowWithDNB while posting. Also, I would like to thank our event partners for their valuable support without whom this event wouldn't have been a success. As all of you are aware that this event is being held to commemorate the contribution of the export sector to the growth of our country's economy, and considering the current situation, the discussions around them become very critical. This event as a whole becomes very critical. The importance of exports to the growth of any economy cannot be overstated. International trade is one of the key driving factors that help drive economic prosperity. Countries that are export-driven tend to grow faster and have improved productivity and an acumen for innovation and are able to provide high income opportunities to their people. Trade enables integration with the global economy and participation across global value chains, thereby boosting the economic growth and development. No doubt, over the last 2 decades, exports have played a very increasingly important role in boosting India's economic growth. Now, looking at the recent past, the pandemic, however, changed things significantly for us and across the international landscape, international trade landscape as well. There we have widespread disruptions in the global supply chains. And just as we thought that the worst of the pandemic was behind us, the Russian-Ukraine crisis has put a renewed stress on supply chains as financial sanctions, closed airspaces, and armies blocking logistics create obstacles for our already frayed global trade. Having said this, these challenges or disruptions in the global value chain is likely to bring about a shift as companies across the world look to realign their global chain strategies and build more diversified supply base and reduce dependencies on a single source. In this context, India has an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to play a key role in reshaping the global supply chains. Indian exporters will therefore need to showcase their potential, and what better than being listed in a publication or being showcased at an event like this, which is aptly titled Business Across Borders. Today's event is an endeavor to recognize and showcase the contribution of exports to the country's economy. We will also discuss the changing landscape of global trade and value chains and how India is very well placed to play a larger role in the new scheme of things. The event will also feature the release of our publication, Business Across Borders 2022, which provides a snapshot of the industry, the current challenges and opportunities, as well as perspectives on global supply chains in the post-pandemic world. The publication will have a list of India's leading exporters across various sectors. We have amongst us eminent personalities from the industry who will lend their insights on the significance of Indian exporters in the global trade. We also have a panel of experts who will discuss the current challenges and emerging opportunities for the exports industry and what the future looks like for all of us. And before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, may I take a moment to thank our event partners again for their invaluable support. Now, to kickstart today's event, I would like to invite Mr. Avinash Gupta, Managing Director and CEO, Dun Bradstreet, India, to deliver the welcome address. A little bit about Mr. Gupta. An execution-focused leader with a strong global background, Mr. Gupta has been in the industry for over 3 decades. Presently, he's at the helm of Dun Bradstreet's go-to-market strategy and business operations. Prior to joining Dun Bradstreet, he worked with Rabo Equity Advisors as the managing director. He held various leadership positions in various global organizations like Deloitte, HSBC, UBS, Barings, Citibank, etc., and has a vast experience in financial services, including M&A, equity and debt financing, private equity placement as well. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Avinash Gupta, and the stage is all yours, Mr. Gupta. Over to you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of Dun Bradstreet at this grand virtual event, Business Across Borders 2022. Today's summit is a platform that seeks to bring under one roof all the leading companies among the Indian exporter fraternity, policymakers, trade enablers, logistic solution providers, and key stakeholders of the international trade ecosystem. It is also an endeavor to capture the pulse of India's exports and analyze the future roadmap for Indian exporters to scale new heights. Today, I would like to give all of you a global as well as a domestic perspective on the Indian MSMEs. Globally, all companies have been exposed to several supply chain shocks in the latent cost of reliance on a single destination sourcing. First, obviously, by the COVID-19 pandemic, and now by the ever-evolving Russia-Ukraine crisis. If this trend continues, it could most likely be an opportunity for India, as our country is considered to be a very attractive destination with one of the largest consumer bases, as well as one of the lowest manufacturing costs in the world. It is a great opportunity for India, and one should look to capitalize on this as a country. Dun Bradstreet constantly monitors the inquiries made on Indian companies. We have observed that there has been a significant increase in the inquiries from countries like Hong Kong, United Kingdom, and Sweden, which in our database grew at a CAGR of approximately 550% in the case of Hong Kong, over 80% in the case of the UK, and over 80% in the case of Sweden during the period of 2 years starting 2019 to 2021. In the World Economic Forum's Global Competitive Report of 2019, India ranked at a poor 131 out of the 141 economies under the trade openness parameter. This was primarily due to the increase of 45% in the product categories, tariffs increased in the 45% of the product categories, while tariffs decreased only on 1% of the product categories. The success of our neighbors in the recent past and even now lie more in the export-led model of their growth and not in import substitution. India can have its own turnaround story if we pursue both the manufacturing as well as the service sector side with equal zeal. We currently have a 52% share in the global IT and BPM outsourcing market. India should continue to leverage our talent pool to further our share in the global services export market. Now, let us look at the domestic MSME scenario. Dun Bradstreet, as you know, has been engaging closely with MSMEs for over 2 decades in the country, and our library of responses through the surveys, several surveys we have compiled over now cover thousands of MSMEs. But not surprisingly, the problems they cite have not changed. Difficulty in access to finance is cited as the single largest, biggest problem for MSMEs in our country. Only 8% of the MSMEs are served by the formal credit channels in our country. Now, when you compare this with other emerging markets like Indonesia, Philippines, China, Malaysia, Vietnam, and even closer to home in Sri Lanka, where 1 in 5 MSMEs have access to formal sources of finance. So 8% versus over 20% in these countries. Dun Bradstreet's research found that the Indian microenterprises that did have access to external finance reported a 19% return on capital employed compared to only 2% ROCE for the enterprises that did not have access to formal finance. Clearly, there is a significant positive outcome of access to finance, and this is a huge opportunity to lenders and huge opportunity to maximize benefit on both sides, the lenders as well as the borrowers. In another survey, we observed that 2 out of every 5 MSMEs consider access to global markets, and access to finance is the key challenges that curb their growth. The Prime Minister of our country, Shri Narendra Modi, has been vocal about the government's aspiration to making India a $5 trillion economy in the near future. I would like to dwell a little on the power of our economy and why this aspiration can be achieved. Firstly, focusing on the birth rate of new businesses. Dun Bradstreet's analysis shows that the birth rate of new businesses, which is defined as new business registrations as a percentage of active businesses, increased from approximately 10% in financial year 20 to over 11, close to 12% in fiscal 2022. These new businesses clearly helped absorb a large part of the workforce that was displaced in the aftermath of the pandemic and are hence very integral to the economic revival. Second, we've all seen the growth of startups, and these startups clearly account for a large, disproportionate share of economic growth. Data from the annual survey of industry shows that firms less than 5 years of age constitute only 16% of all firms. However, they account for more than 24% of the net value added in the economy. And lastly, the untapped potential of the MSMEs. I mean, currently, as we know, for every 100 rupees created in the economy, the MSMEs contribute approximately 30%, 30 rupees. The government aims to raise this to 40%. And recently, the Minister of State for Finance at a conference actually mentioned 40 to 45%. Now, when you do the maths on this translates to a targeted contribution of approximately $2 trillion in the near future out of the GDP of $5 trillion. So just to help you put that number in perspective, if Indian MSMEs were a country by themselves, they would become the 12th largest economy in the world in terms of GDP, larger than the economies of countries such as Australia, Russia, Spain, Mexico. This is truly impressive, and we need to do everything to make these MSMEs prosper and grow. To take MSMEs to this level, the government is adopting some tangible steps. For example, firstly, the definition itself, the updated definition of the MSMEs announced after 14 years when the MSMED Act came into force in 2006, intends to ensure that their growth is not stifled and that qualified firms can get benefits that are due to them. Relief and credit support for MSMEs were multifaceted under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, including collateral-free loans, subordinated debt for stressed MSMEs, and fiscal and monetary measures to increase credit availability, equity fusion, e-market linkages, income tax refunds, and the ease of doing business itself. Having said this, if we truly aspire to leapfrog in economic growth and job creation, we will need to focus on promoting manufacturing through the production-linked incentive plans to help develop backward linkages with the MSME sector in the country. These are just some of the several initiatives which can help our MSME universe of companies and the exporter from fraternity reach new heights. Today, you can look forward to gaining some valuable insights from our esteemed speakers and the panel discussions, which will focus on how Indian companies can scale global heights. In the course of the proceedings, Dun Bradstreet India will also be launching its annual publication, Business Across Borders 2022, featuring the top exporters of our country. We would like to thank our esteemed keynote speakers for gracing our summit and sharing their valuable insights. A big thank you to all of our esteemed dignitaries and members of the panel discussions for your participation. Thank you very much to our sponsors for partnering with us and bringing this event to life. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and taking the opportunity to attend this summit today. I'm very sure you will have some fabulous takeaways from the sessions of today. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for sharing your invaluable insights with us. Truly interesting. Moving on, we have some very interesting sessions lined up, beginning with our keynotes for the day. For this, may I invite Mr. Mahesh Desai, Chairman of EEBC India, which is the largest export promotion council in India with a membership strength of around 13,000. And ladies and gentlemen, 13,000 domestic engineering firms, including SMEs, as well as large corporates. A little bit about Mr. Desai. Mr. Mahesh Desai has been serving as a chairman of EEBC India since July 2020. He embarked upon his journey as a technocrat entrepreneur 5 decades ago in Hyderabad. He has been manufacturing and exporting pumps and has executed water management projects all across the world. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Mr. Desai myself, and he's a wonderful gentleman. And I hope all of you will find his keynote pretty interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Desai.
Welcome to this webinar. Today's topic is very, very important in today's international world and also for India. Doing business across border. India has been exporting goods, doing business throughout the world from thousands of years. As we know, we have been exporting and we were trade surplus for thousands of years. At one time, India was occupying 25 to 30% of the total international trade. So doing business across border is already there in our DNA. But in today's world, things have changed. Things have changed for better. Things have also changed better for us. India has opened up its borders for foreign companies to come and do business here. Similarly, other companies are also opening up their borders and goods for our product in their countries. In last 2-3 years, things have dramatically changed. Pandemic has changed a lot. They have taught us a lesson how to be safe from the pandemics. It has also brought to notice China plus one policy, where too much dependence on one country like China for their requirement by other economies is not good. This has given a big opportunity for India and Indian entrepreneurs to venture in a big way into international markets. This will also help us to understand the global supply chain and also how do we organize our own supply chain within the country. Other dynamics is that there's a lot of foreign remittances coming to India to do business in India. This will also help us for alternative finances for our businesses. The other important point is that the government is now very, very proactive to businesses and they want to generate more and more jobs. Their policy is also to help industries from tier 2 and tier 3 cities as well as to MSME sector which was not there earlier. Now let's study one by one the factors which will help us to go across border. The first important point to go across border is change or rather go across thought process of our mind. We have to think globally. We have to think differently to market our product. So what do we do for this? We go and visit them, our buyers, or those markets where we intend to export our product. So for that, we do study at home. Our embassies will write to our embassies about the demand of the product which we are manufacturing or which we are trading. So we will get some feedback from our embassies. Then through our export promotion councils, we will also write to counterpart of other associations or associations of certain products. That will give very good information. How do we go about this? Once we have good information with us, then we will visit those markets. We will visit those importers with whom we have already contacted and established some relations. Then we will go there, we will talk to them, We'll try to understand their requirement, their exact requirements, their quantity, their duration of contract, and many other things. We'll also try to explain them the limitations we have in India at present. Third thing is that once you come back to India, please try to understand their technical specification, their quality requirement, their delivery schedules, their other important factors which we have to understand. Then we have to, once we are ready with them, it's better that we invite them to our factories, we invite them to India and have further discussions. We can take the help of our government or our associations for this. Once we are through that, then we produce the exact requirement of those products which international chains require at certain time. Hmm? So we get them tested to their international standards first in India. Then once we are through the testing and approval by our technical institutes or inspection agencies or laboratories, we go to the international certification agencies to certify our product so that they can be accepted readily by not only by buyers but by other areas also where we intend to go. I mean other markets, other geographical areas where our similar products can be further exported. This will also we will go beyond one market to other markets. Once this is done, then we supply them a first trial batch, taking care of packaging, and also the most essential part is the delivery schedule. We have to supply them the quality product with proper packaging so that the buyer receives them in good condition and he can further pass it on to the distribution line in his country or to his uh, buyers. So once our trial batch is approved, then we go beyond and we try to get into the supply chain. Believe me, it's not going to be an easy process. It's going to be long and we have to be very patient. Our product may get failed sometimes initially in our laboratories, but we must have patience. In such cases, we can take the help of specialists or subject specialists or even our national laboratories who will give us services to how to improve product. So these are the some few things. Once we are ready with this, then we can go further. Now, what do we need to achieve this? How can government help us? Unless and until there is a proactive government and they provide us enabling environment for international exports on our own, we do not have resources, or we do not have contacts, or we do not have sufficient information. So the government support is very, very essential by way of policies, by way of some initial financial supports, or by way of certain initiatives they give us to help to produce quality standard internationally accepted product. So government plays a very, very vital role. Once the government also should help us and give some support for initially for our international travels, and also they should help us to get visas, particularly multiple entry visas to certain countries, because when first time when we go we may not have any contact, So we have no invitation letters, whereas the embassies will ask invitation letters. So we need government help for all this. So once government has, the second point is once we start exporting, the most important point is the logistic. As we all know, there's a very huge cost in transportation, in logistics. A study was done where about 8 to 10% of our logistic cost is there on the cost of the product, which is very, very high when compared to China or other countries. So the government have to provide us smooth transportation and last mile connectivity to our ports. Second thing, the state government also should give us early clearances like customs. Sometimes our products are held up at ports for many, many weeks. So there should be some mechanism where there is a early redressal of our difficulties. We have we have approached the government time and again, and government is also very proactive for this. Having come to this, then what are other things where we can look forward for our businesses? The one thing is that we should participate in international tenders where big supplies are there for the national tenders. So there are a lot of soft impedances put by many countries in their pre-qualification bids. So we need government support also, so that we get we get smooth sailing for our approval for pre-qualified bidders. We need lot of support from our embassies. First, to give us timely information about the forthcoming tenders in their country. Secondly, many countries publish their tender in the local language. So we must get support from our embassies or from the government to translate those tenders in English, and we will be able to submit tenders in English so that again they are translated into the local language and submitted. This way, we can get big business also under World Bank aid, under multilateral aids, and not only and also other aids, hmm, so that we can also get huge bulk business. This will also help our product to be popular in those countries. People will know us by our product. That will help us to establish our brand image. Let me give you an example. In Indonesia, the three-wheeler is known as Bajaj. They don't know three-wheelers. They will call every three-wheeler as a Bajaj. So the Bajaj has established their brand image in Indonesian and other Southeast Asian markets. So the brand image helps a lot for doing business across the borders also. Similarly, one more example I'll give you. When I went to West Africa and North Africa, the oil engines were known as Kirloskars because Kirloskar is there for many, many years. So they call oil engine as Kirloskar. So this is the advantage and the benefit of establishing brand image. And then to join into the IT, government should also give us help so that we can work with our academia like IITs, Indian Institute of Sciences, or other places, so that we continuously improve our product to meet the changing requirement of quality and standards in international market. Government should also provide us some support for this. Not only this support, but we also need to tie up with counterpart in other countries like developed economies where we can tie up for technology tie up, transfers and other things so that we can start the production in India and then re-export also to them so that it's a very affordable cost. The one suggestions which we have put up to the government to do joint R&D with MSME from other countries and our MSMEs with the support of CSIR laboratories as well as our academia in India. For that, we need also support from the government to visit international exhibition, international conferences, international other things where we can go participate. At the same time, we can invite our buyers to visit India also. Last but not least, three factors emerges to be sustainable in the international chain. First and foremost is the quality. Second is timely delivery. Third is understanding the international culture of doing international trade. These are few things. And lastly, to update ourselves with international changing, ever changing scenario in quality, quantity, and also other requirements. The other important point when we discuss with our counterpart for technology tie-up, nowadays they are insisting that in our factory we do not have any child labor. We follow all the rules of carbon footprint and our energy is for our energy. There is a energy also. We are energy saving. We are using energy saving processes and also machinery. So these are few things which we have to join if we really have to join the international. Carbon footprint is the most important thing that we have to follow in today's world. These are few things which I have in mind to go across the border. I would say, now why across the border? Why not beyond the borders? Beyond means we participate in product development, we participate in research and development, we participate in many things, new technologies, sunrise technologies, and many things. This is beyond the borders I am talking. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And people, you can write to me if you have anything. What best knowledge I have, I will definitely share with you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. Your words of wisdom were indeed very insightful. I would now like to introduce you to our next keynote speaker, who is an industry stalwart and, of course, our special guest, Mr. N Ramesh. He is a Deputy Managing Director at the India Exim Bank. A little bit about Mr. Ramesh. Mr. N Ramesh is an officer of Indian Telecom Service from the 1999 batch. Prior to his appointment at India Exim Bank, he served as an executive director at the National Agricultural Cooperative Marketing Federation of India, and he has also served as a director in the Department of Commerce, Government of India from 2016 to 2019, where he oversaw agriculture, exports inspection, biotechnology, and plantations, and the plantations division. The stage is all yours, Mr. N Ramesh. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be part of this virtual event, Business Across Border 2022, organized by the DNB. The theme for the event, Going Global for Scaling New Heights, remains a well-timed and relevant as we recover from a global pandemic of such magnitude. The impact of COVID-19 is not only reshaping the world economy, but the evolving nature of the virus is also changing the contours of the economic recovery. The current global geopolitical environment and soaring energy prices, among other things, have also remained significant areas of concern. According to the latest global trade update by UNCTAD, released in February 22, global trade has reached a record high in 2021 of about US dollar 28.5 trillion, which has witnessed contraction in 2020. Going by that, it would be an increase of 25% over 2020 and 13% over pre-pandemic levels of 2019. In the first 2 decades of 21st century, emerging markets have witnessed rapid economic development, although at different speeds across different regions. According to the IMF, emerging and developing economies grew at 6.5% in 2021 after a contraction of 2% in 2022. Emerging and developing Asia has systemically outperformed the economies of other regions over the years and grew by 7.2% in 2021 after a contraction of minus 0.9% in 2020. It's mainly driven by China and India. The trade volume generated by emerging markets has expanded significantly over these past 2 decades, particularly led by China. Emerging market share of global trade volume has also increased from 32% in 2000 to 46% in 2019. Following a significant drop in the first half of 2020, coinciding with the outbreak of pandemic, global merchandise trade is rebounding, with the exception of cross-border services trade due to restriction in international travel. According to IMF, the global volume of trade in goods and services grew by 9.3% in 2021 after undergoing a contraction of 8.2% in 2020. Trade volume in emerging and developing economies grew at a higher pace of 11.1% as compared to growth in trade volume in advanced economies registered at 8.3% in 2021. According to UNCTAD's latest update, in Q4 of 2021, trade in goods increased more strongly for developing than for developed countries. Moreover, the trade growth between the developing countries outpaced global trade during Q4 of 2021 with an increase of about 32% relative to previous year, which is more or less similar to pre-pandemic levels. The disruption of global manufacturing value chains due to the COVID-19 pandemic presents a tremendous opportunity for India to become one of the key nodes in the chain. Various export initiatives have been undertaken by the government, and implementation of these initiatives would pave the way for the sustainable export performance in India going forward. The government continues its thrust on the infrastructure sector as a key enabler of the country's economic growth. The recent union budget focuses on greater state participation through the PM Gati Shakti initiative and inclusive infrastructure development through initiatives for the northeastern states and steps taken for greater participation of farmers and small businesses. With a view to ease the process of submitting documents by the exporters, the government has launched the ICE Gate, a national portal of the Indian Customs that provides e-filing services to the trade, cargo carriers, and trading partners electronically. At present, more than 44,000 users are registered, serving about 12.5 lakh importers or exporters. In order to facilitate exporters through a secure electronic paperless certificate of origin issuance process, Director General of Foreign Trade under the Department of Commerce has provided common digital platform for issuance of certificates of origins. This common digital platform is a single point of access for all certificates of origin, for all FTAs or preferential trade agreements, for all agencies and all products. Even as India's exports have grown, its share in global merchandise exports has grown modestly from 0.9% in 2005 to 1.6% in 2020, as compared to China, whose share has more than doubled from 7.2% to about 14.7% during the same period. Vietnam, which in 2015 accounted for a global merchandise export share of just 1% in 2015, has surpassed India in 2020. Today, it accounts for around 1.61%, whereas India accounts for 1.57% of global trade. This is mainly due to high GVC participation, as it has emerged as a leading alternative to China for labor intensive exports. India's global value chain participation rate is at about 36% compared to Vietnam's 62%. Labor abundant countries like India can reap dividends by adopting policies aimed at strengthening their backward participation in global value chain. India's backward linkages remain comparatively low due to increasing reliance on commodity-based exports and greater focus on domestic sector. The world has been increasingly concentrating on China plus one strategy since the pandemic to reduce supply chain concentrations. In order to leverage this situation, India has stepped up its domestic manufacturing capacity by rolling out the production linked incentive scheme. This scheme is expected to boost the export momentum in the coming years and facilitate India's deeper integration into global value chains. India Exim Bank, since its inception, has been actively involved in promoting India's trade with partner countries across the globe through its wide ranges of products and services under its policy and commercial business. India Exim Bank, besides its large-scale financing programs such as lines of credit, buyer's credit under the National Export Insurance Account, and commercial project exports financing, enabling project exporters to execute turnkey and supply project overseas and new geographies and expand their business in existing export markets, has also introduced few new programs to cater to increasing requirements of other players in the sector. Few of them are Ubarte Sitare program, which aims at identifying Indian companies that are future champions with good export potential and offering them a combination of equity, debt, and technical assistance to provide an impetus to their exports. A new program by name Trade Assistance Program has been launched to provide support by way of various trade instruments to various banks in India engaged in international trade by offering transaction specific partial or full guarantees to cover payment risks on banks in least developed or developing countries. The factoring as a product helps transfer of payment risk from a smaller and relatively weaker enterprise to a larger corporate buyer. India has seen very small factoring volume compared to the rest of the competing countries. India Exim Bank had earlier a factoring venture and is re-entering this particular business in order to support exporters and to provide better support to MSMEs and to support trade finance facilities for exporters. With these new initiatives, it is expected that more exporters would be able to avail easier trade finance solutions and achieve the target of 1 trillion US dollars merchandise export by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. N Ramesh, for sharing your thoughts and for taking time out from your very busy schedule to be a part of the summit today. Moving on, it is indeed an honor to be among such esteemed personalities, I must confess, ladies and gentlemen. And without further ado, I would like to invite the next distinguished personality who heads the premier institution for promoting India's international business, Dr. Ajay Sahai. A little bit about Dr. Ajay Sahai. He is the Director General and CEO of the Federation of Indian Exports Organization, also known as FIO. And FIO is the apex export promotion organization of the country, with direct membership of around 32,000 exporters from all over the country. Prior to this, Dr. Sahai has served as a joint DGFT in the policy division of the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, and he has played a key role in formulation of the foreign trade policy from 1996 to 2003. Quite impressive, I must say. He was also a member of a high-level task force for the Government of India on Exim policy, as well as other key councils and task forces. Dr. Sahai specializes in agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures for WTO. He has received allocates from the World Bank for his contribution to Ease of Doing Business report for 2016, 2017, and 2018. Needless to say, ladies and gentlemen, he is one eminent personality who I would also want to hear from. Put your hands together and let's welcome Dr. Ajay Sahai.
Hi everyone. Let me first thank DNB for inviting me to the Business Across Border Summit 2022, and it's an honor and privilege to be at this forum. Exports play a pivotal role in countries' prosperity, and we have seen that happening in the Southeast Asian countries. And Bangladesh is a recent example. Though India is a domestic demand economy, but exports play a transformational role. All those years in which India clocked a GDP growth of 8% or more were the year when exports also exhibited 15% or more growth, and converse is equally true. Whenever exports declined or contracted, it was difficult to sustain GDP at 6%, and therefore, when we are entering towards a 5 trillion economy, it is equally important that export continue to play a role which they have played this financial year. This year, in fact, India's exports, which were just at $291 billion in merchandise, will be touching a new milestone of $400 billion. In services, we are expected to move from $205 billion in 2020-21 to around $250 billion in 21-22. And in short, it means that 50% of the GDP contribution in 21-22 will come from the export sector. Out of an additional GDP of around $300 billion or so, more than $150 billion will be contributed by the export sector. And I'm pretty happy with this kind of performance by the exporter, particularly amongst the most challenging time in the global trade. We are all aware of the challenges caused by the pandemic, and that has a huge setback on logistics and liquidity also. The good news is that the order booking position of India's exporters is pretty good. China plus one policy has definitely brought India on radar of most of the global companies. We are flushed with order, but we have the challenges on liquidity and logistics. The prices of the inputs have gone up substantially. We are seeing how now the crude is moving from around $70 a barrel in December to close to $140 a barrel. The freight cost has also skyrocketed, and that has resulted in the demand for additional liquidity. And we are in catch 22 situation because the collateral which has been already submitted to the banks, they have also deteriorated. And that's why we feel that banks have to come forward and provide necessary support to the export sector. On the logistics front, we are seeing there is still a shortage of container. There is shortage in the space also on the ships, and freights are again moving northward. We thought that freight may somber after second quarter of 2022, but with the new development in our neighborhood, I don't feel that freight will come down in entire 2022. But I think these are the challenges which we will settle down in a couple of months. Our bigger challenges is to look into the structural changes which are required to support export. And for me, manufacturing is my biggest challenge. We have seen manufacturing support coming from the government also, but the results has so far not been very encouraging. We have good IIP number for a month or so, but then there is a dip. And unless we support qualitative manufacturing of our country, it is very difficult to sustain exports in the long run. We know the challenges in the manufacturing also. Though, of course, India is one of the most competitive country in manufacturing so far as the cost within the factory are concerned. But we are outpriced because of the costs which are basically applicable to the charges outside the factory, and that includes the logistics cost also. Though, of course, number of efforts are being made to reduce the logistics cost also, and budget has also given a direction for infrastructure improvement across all segment of the logistics. We also feel that there is need to have the change in the profile of India's exports also. If you look into the global imports, electrical, electronic, and machinery, along with automobile, account for roughly 35% of the global trade, with a whopping figure of around $6.5 trillion in this segment. Our exports is just 1%, and that's why we have to look into quantum jump in these segments. The good news is the production link incentive the government has announced for now 15 sectors. All the 3 sectors are covered here. We are importing goods roughly close to $100 billion relating to electrical, electronic, machinery, and automobile. So on the one hand, we will be saving on imports, and we will be definitely supporting our exports effort through the PLI scheme. Though, of course, a lot of criticism has come for the PLI scheme, particularly for the MSME. I personally feel that the PLI scheme will result in some kind of hub and spoke model where the large companies will set up and MSMEs will evolve around them as a kind of ancillary. We have seen that happening very successfully in case of automobile sector. This is also an opportunity for India to integrate into the global value chain. Unfortunately, we were not a significant player in global value chain, except to some extent in automobile and gems and jewelry sector. This is very important as still, despite the pandemic, 50% of the global trade happens through the GBCs only. But now we are seeing the customs tariff coming down. A lot of trade facilitation efforts have been taken by the customs. It has helped India to increase its ranking both in trading across border segment and ease of doing business segment also. We are having much effective free trade agreements also. India has worked out a quad with Japan and Australia, with US on the one side and with US, Israel and UAE on the other side. These kind of strategic partnership will also pave the way for having a kind of CEPA or free trade agreement with these countries. The good thing is that now government is pushing India's FTA with complementaries economies. We have not been very successful in exploiting the potential of FTAs, as our previous FTAs were with the countries who were very strong in manufacturing, maybe Japan, South Korea, Thailand, or to some extent Malaysia. But now we have just signed an FTA with UAE. We are now moving towards FTA with or CEPA with Australia and Canada. Next year, we will be having some with the regional bloc, including EU, SACU, and GCC countries. And these kinds of market access will provide much opportunity to Indian exports. At the same time, I think Indian exports should also look into branding. We need to have a 3-tier strategy for branding. The promoting country as a brand should be left to the government. The organization, different export promotion council should promote a product as a brand, as we have seen, for example, Californian almond, which is being promoted by their associations, and then individual companies should promote their brand. The advantage of the brand is that it not only fetches the per unit prices of the product, but it establishes country as a quality supplier of the product. But for that to happen, it is equally important for us to have increased investment in R&D. Our R&D investment is one amongst the lowest amongst the competitor, be it South Korea, Israel, Thailand, or Malaysia. We need to incentivize R&D also, as R&D is having long gestation period with lot of uncertainty. Some kind of tax concession should flow to that. A country like India can best be benefited if we promote e-commerce retail exports. We have high quality craftsmen, artisans, women entrepreneurs, small businesses. We have a scheme like GI or One District, One Product. All these can yield result in a very short time if it is backed by the e-commerce retail exports. Though, of course, e-commerce retail export has been recognized by the government of India in 2015, but not much has happened in the last 6 years. There are a lot of regulatory issues which are coming in the way. All that we want that it should be provided the same treatment as applicable to the merchandise exports. And I'm pretty sure that it has a potential of 10x in next 5 years also. There are a lot of young entrepreneurs who have entered into the field of exports, and I'm pretty sure the new foreign trade policy would be focusing on that. So let me not take much of your time. Let me again reiterate that we are on course to achieve a $5 trillion economy status with an export of around $1 trillion or more in merchandise. Though, of course, in the long term, we are looking into $1 trillion of exports of services also by 2029-30. But at the same time, I will warn the countries to be ready to face increasing protectionism. But then no country in the world has grown on the tailwinds of a favorable economic condition. We have to propel our own way. So with these words, I thank all of you once again, particularly to DNB for giving me a patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sahai, for sharing that insightful perspective with us. In the current scenario, it is important for our exporter fraternity to be confident that they are backed by very strong leaders. We now come to the most awaited segment of today's event, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it's time to launch the second edition of the Business Across Borders 2022 publication. I'm sure all of you would be excited as I am to have a glimpse of the publication. So go get your copy after the event. Before I delve about the publication, a little bit about Dun Bradstreet. Dun Bradstreet, or DNB as it is referred to, is a leading global provider of B2B data and insights, and it provides its services mostly on the AI-driven platforms. I must truly say, ladies and gentlemen, it is a forward-looking company. And in an endeavor to contribute to the economy, DNB works very closely with the key stakeholders of the economy. And needless to say, the exporters definitely are one amongst them. Through this publication, DNB intends to recognize and celebrate the achievements of the Indian exporter fraternity. The publication serves as a valuable source of information of the Indian exports industry, the opportunities, the challenges, as well as the future roadmap. It also includes the profiles and listings of India's leading exporters. Needless to say, ladies and gentlemen, in the current scenario, India is expected to be one of the hot spots for identifying more of exporters to make sure that the ruptured supply chain is kind of taken care of and it's brought back to normalcy. And this is a very lucrative destination as of today. And I must tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there will be a lot of global companies looking at the list of the top Indian exporters, and this is going to serve as a fabulous compendium for this. So without further ado, we request our guests for today to please join us in the grand digital launch for the publication. And I would request Dr. Sahai to please do the honors for us. Ladies and gentlemen, the publication Business Across Borders 2022. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the last leg of our event, the leaderboard, in conversation with our experts. We have with us some eminent personalities to discuss the current scenario, as well as share their perspectives on a very pertinent topic today, going global for scaling new heights. And of course, they're addressed and to all our exporter fraternity today, and I'm very sure it will be absolutely insightful for you. Now, just before we delve into the panel discussion, a little bit of information for all our viewers. You have a chat box section where you can put in your questions and you can ask our panelists. Please do not forget to type in your name as well as the name of the person or the panelist you wish to address your question to. And of course, needless to say, you can also tweet and talk about it by using the hashtags #BAB as well as #GrowWithDNB. on Twitter, on LinkedIn, as well as on Facebook. It's all up to you. But please do make sure you share your thoughts and share, of course, a couple of questions with us as well. And without further ado, I would like to now call upon Dun Bradstreet's Chief Global Economist, or rather, I would say Global Chief Economist, Dr. Arun Singh. A little bit about Dr. Arun Singh. Dr. Singh is a professional economist with more than 15 years of experience in macroeconomic research and analytics. His area of work has spanned across quantitative and qualitative economic research, econometric modeling, commodity research, and industry research across a wide spectrum of sectors. And joining Dr. Singh today, we have Mithaleshwar Thakur, Additional Director General, Ministry of Commerce in India. You have his profile up on the screen for you to view. Then we have Dr. Badri Narayan Gopal Krishnan, Lead Advisor and Head Trade and Commerce, Niti Aayog. We then have Professor Rakesh Mohan Joshi, Dean, Institute of Foreign Trade. Following Professor Rakesh, we have Mr. Yaduvendra Mathur, Vice Chairman, Consulting Engineers Group. And without further ado, I would now request all our panelists to please come on stage and join us. And over to you, Dr. Arun Singh.
Thank you, Naina, for such a wonderful introduction, and I'm looking forward to have a really great session. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which market you are joining in. Welcome to today's panel discussion, that's Going Global, Scaling New Heights. Today we have, as you know, Naina said that we have prominent personalities across government and academia to discuss the subject and share their valuable insights. If I go back a few years, earlier, we have seen that there was increased thrust and the focus by the government and other stakeholders to increase India's share in the global trade. Many initiatives being taken, policies being framed, and measures initiated to tap that opportunity. We have achieved some successes, some learning, and now we are looking forward to leapfrog. If I have to talk about some of those supports by the government that revolve around market diversification, product competition, country-to-country alignment, infrastructure improvement, and more important, consideration for factory gate to port infrastructure to manage or to decrease the dwell time and cost. And that was the biggest issue cited by many exporters, many companies in India for many years. I think many initiatives being taken. Now, there are internal initiatives taken by the government, which are basically going to discuss today. But there's some opportunity. Those opportunities, basically the base of those opportunities, very crisis, what I can call it. And there's a health crisis, and there is a global economic crisis. There's a two which is going today. One, the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic. The pandemic has disrupted the supply chain across the globe. This unprecedented crisis has given a new set of risks for all the businesses, not just in the domestic market, also in the global market. Global companies are now looking to de-link the geographical risk, and that's exactly the great opportunity for Indian exporters to re-strategize their business, to push for self-reliance and enhance capacity to become the manufacturing hub for the world in the coming years. And I can see some of improvement there. Why? Because when I look at my DNB data, by the time we will complete our panel discussion today, around 400 companies would have been already inquired by our global counterpart. They're basically looking for the new customer, the new supplier, new vendor for a better opportunity. That number is almost doubled as compared to pre-pandemic level. So that's a great opportunity pandemic has provided. Of course, that's a health crisis. But another crisis is unfolding is the Russian-Ukraine crisis. Companies are looking for the new suppliers who basically new new vendors to diversify if they're supplying or getting goods from the Russia supply and the sanction entities. So there are opportunity for Indian exporter, and I think exactly we are going to have a conversation around that. Are we ready? In this conversation, we are going to find the answer. Are we ready? Are all stakeholders in this journey ready to capitalize this opportunity? Today, we are going to find about some 7 key subjects in terms of the discussion. That's impact on the ongoing geopolitical crisis, India's positioning in the emerging global value chain, increasing protectionism in the global trade, India's free trade agreement status, government initiatives for ease of doing business across borders, need to enhance export competitiveness, and the seventh and the last one, which is basically very important, is basically finance availability. So with that, I will move to our first speaker, Mr. Joshi, Professor Joshi. Sorry, my bad. Uh, I just said there is two things happening today. We are going through two major crises. One still not over, while people are saying that it's over, and maybe they have some foresight might be over in 2022, but we don't know. And another one is basically hitting Russia and Ukraine crisis. The current geopolitical crisis between Russia and Ukraine have literally damaged the economic prospects across countries and already impacted by the pandemic. How bad, how devastating it could be from a world trade perspective when you talk about what will be the short term and long term impact of sanction imposed by the NATO nation and the counter sanction going to be by Russia. What is your view in that, Professor Joshi?
Thank you so much, and namaskar to everybody for inviting me for this August forum. And I'm very happy. I think the subject you have chosen today was, the getting opportunities beyond border. Going global for scaling new heights. And I'm very happy to talk about it as a professor of globalization. We have, traditionally, or the economists have traditionally talked about globalization and global value chain. So secret of success under all trade theories, theoretically was said that, there has to be a free trade, free movement, global value chain, and, probably this is the only secret of success. And India, we used to say that, our lack of economic development was because India has not been integral part of the global value chain, was considered to be one of the big weaknesses. And I think last year, soon after pandemic, you are very right to say the entire global value chain got disrupted. Now, disrupted because of the pandemic started in China. And I'm told that today also, as on date, China is the worst hit. So China basically account for 32% of the world manufacturing, and therefore for supply of all the product it was dependent on Chinese, the global value chain, in which the China was an integral part of that. Incidentally, India was not a part of that, the global value chain. And then now you see, before the pandemic, we were coping off the pandemic because the world trade, slumped down, not only in India but across the border, because of disruptions in the supply chain, and the disruption in the demand. Services sector absolutely out of gear or totally failed. Now the new situation which has arrived because of the conflict, you talk of a war or a conflict, I think you can use any term that you want, is absolutely, this conflict resulted in the economic sanction. And as the President Putin has already talked of, the putting economic sanction equals to initiating a nuclear kind of a war, or initiating a war. And therefore, I think a few days back, he threatened for a nuclear war, primarily because of the economic sanctions. Now, if you see, the whole, the concept of globalization has gone to a, the rethought or a retrospection. I think last year I wrote an article for Financial Express, wherein I wrote about that, the globalization at the crossroad. The economist or the trade theories, you talk at the theory of the comparative advantage or an absolute advantage or factor endowment. We talked of, the global trade or the international trade is beneficial for countries and the societies. And you have seen in the post-pandemic era, every country wanted to have protectionistic measure and what we call as a self-reliance or Atmanirbhar. India came out with the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and probably, not only India, but all countries across the world. You talk of America, again to quote, the President Trump, who is a great businessman and, who don't mince his words talking about that. He said the America first. And he said that, I'm not the president of the world, I'm president of America. And he said, protecting the interest of, you have seen in France, Germany, wherein, the political parties which came in power basically because of the protectionistic measure. Brexit, you have seen, absolutely, we have done a lot of research on. Now with this, the new thing, I think again the thought has come that, there is no shortcut to self-sufficiency. You do not know that your supply chain is broken tomorrow, and therefore, you need to the countries need to prepare themselves, to be self-sufficient for their. Now in this, you have seen that, the almost all supplies from, Russia is absolutely broken. Even the financial payment system, the SWIFT was withdrawn, which has given a lot of, not only a lot of problem, but more than that, it has, going to give a lot of case study and matter for research that what countries have to do under these circumstances. Now, incidentally, India, we have also, working on our own payment system. Russia also has got their own payment system. China has also got on their payment system. Now we are talking of the, the payment system of China and Russia clubbing together. And I think probably the time has come that, India will also have to strengthen its system, not only within India, but we need to leverage it, across the world, so that with the fall of the SWIFT, everything does not go out. Number two. Now, especially the country like India, we are in a very, very, delicate situation. You talk, the between the devil and the. So what is happening now is India, I'm not talking of the political compulsions, but India's defense sector even today has got 60 to 70% of the defense equipment bought from Russia. Now, this defense equipment also require the periodical servicing or a very regular servicing. Number one. Second thing is, India is having, the problem what we call the some hostility with China. If you don't talk of war, we also have do hostility with our with our Western neighbor. That is another problem. Now, our hostility with the Western neighbor and their friendship with our northern neighbor is another matter of deep concern from India. And therefore, you can neither say no or yes in this situation. And, so situation is very typical. Anyway, I'm very happy that I think the India has taken a very, very balanced view, but I'm not very sure that, till what time that this balanced view lasts. Another thing, that the hike in the commodity prices. Russia is an economy which is much smaller than India. Russia's total export is also no match to that of China. China is the largest exporter in the world with 14.23% of the world market. Russia is absolutely, their share in international market is less than us. India's share is 1.7% in the international market. So what is happening is 1.6, 1.7. So what is happening? But now what Russia export? China's basic export is the manufactured goods. Or what we call is, the manufactured goods, part, machinery. But Russia's basic export is the raw material, basically the mineral. Then it comes to, the petroleum, gas. And if you see that Russia supplies petroleum and gas to the whole of the European Union, including America. But now with the sanctions, it was said that the prices of, the petroleum will hike. So that was only thing. And if you see, Russia is absolutely in trouble because of these sanctions, but the European Union is probably more in trouble because of these sanctions. Because rise in petroleum price will rise the cost of almost every industrial activity which is being done in the European Union, and that would impact the competitiveness. Then we came about, identifying alternatives like OPEC restricting their, the production, so that, the petrol prices does not, goes up. And if you see now, probably the time has come, I think, probably first time in my life, that, I'll be able to do the research in this kind of a situation, geopolitical situation, especially on the international trade and international market, how to find the success and transforming, the calamity into an opportunity. Now India is also eyeing for a cheaper oil, because nobody buys from Russia if you only buy. Yeah, so we call it an oligopsony kind of a concept. So if 2-3 countries buy, so I think we may get benefited. India, as you are aware, that now I think India 80-85% of our, the oil, we are dependent on import, and
Yeah.
oil is a key reason, which determines our trade deficiency. Yeah, or balance of trade, the balance of trade or trade deficit. So you need to find an opportunity again, like in pandemic. The global value chain got disrupted, so the new value chain was to be established. And if you see, India has done relatively better or much better compared to other countries. Might be because n number of reasons, but somehow we have performed better. And our, the export and import, especially in 21-22, 38% almost it grew. Import grew even higher. So if you see, we are likely to touch the target of 400 billion US dollar in this financial year. And if the commodity prices goes up, we'll touch that much better, earlier. So we need to find out opportunity in this calamity, which this new situation has created. So I think, again, then sourcing. Now certain products on which we are very dependent on import, sunflower, 70% of the sunflower we import only from Ukraine and Russia, both of them together account for 1/3 of the wheat export across the world. And the wheat exporting country, incidentally, India also exports wheat now. Yeah, so farming, we are not only sufficient, we export wheat. India can find, the price of the wheat in the international market goes up, so we get more profit. So I think anyway, but as a country, there has to be a balance kind of a situation. And I think, as we'll talk later, that India has done a lot of structural reform, the institutional infrastructure. We have done a lot of reform in the policy infrastructure. We have done a lot of reform in the financial infrastructure. And I'm very sure that, I'm very optimistic about Indian economy. I am very optimistic about the country like India. When you see, again, when you talk of, our neighbors, our rival Western neighbor, I don't want to name, when the Prime Minister yesterday said that he does not become the Prime Minister to watch for the price of that, tomato and the onion and the potato. But in India, 3 governments have gone only and only because of price of onion. So I think, all these things are coming into the Chinese stock in the last 1.5 year in the America has fallen to 1/3, 4 trillion to 1 trillion. So, we need to find out opportunities in this, and I'm very optimistic about India. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joshi, for such a wonderful explanation. And I think you touched base certain key element of this Russia-Ukraine crisis and how it's going to change those global mix, because we were looking at some of the data. There are many suppliers based out of, we came up with a paper, in fact, there are 400,000 suppliers based on Russia and the Ukraine who are doing to the Western nation, the European, and then some other Asia Pacific market. The finding alternate supplier, finding alternate customer is going to be challenging as well as opportunity. That's same thing. And in fact, you touched at one point that Europe is fully dependent. Some of those countries, 100% of their energy are imported from the Russia. Whether they can go with what's happening or they can find a solution to, reach some consensus, so at least war is not heading towards, some full-fledged crisis. So I think there's many element happening, but that's provide opportunity. And I think you touch base one point on the protectionism. That's true. For some time we can see it's not about extremely visible on the face, but there are many other elements happening, and I think that could be going to be another factor. I think we should be worrying about this one. With that, I think there are other burning issues in the past. And Professor Joshi, I will come to you on that point. The second thing is that Mr. Thakur, I have one point to as a follow-up piece of what Professor Joshi have just said, that when we talk about the global value chain and right from here to customer end, India is still trying to get into this one. What strategy you think India should adopt to be really benefiting from this global value chain and be part of the global value chain and major player in the global value chain? Mr. Thakur.
Thank you, Dun Bradstreet, for giving me this opportunity of sharing my views. Non-participation of India in global value chain has been a thing that we have been discussing for quite some time. See, given the growing importance of global value chain in today's economy, I think there is need to bring measures to foster, I would say, India's inclusion into international production process. Actually, what is GVC? What is global value chain? Actually, all said and done, it is actually internationalization of production process. That for making a particular product, you have components and intermediates made in various geography depending on the cost and other implications. So currently, approximately 60% of the world trade actually takes place through global value chain. The old era of trade between firm versus firm is now getting fast replaced by trade between supply chain versus supply chain. But unfortunately, the Indian manufacturing is marked by almost near non-participation in most of the global value chain. Products manufactured in GVCs account for, like I said, 60 to 70% of the world trade. But India's share is meager. As a result of this, what has happened is that India does not manufacture most of the electronic, telecom, or high-tech products, as manufacturing of these products require participation in GVC. And consequently, we have to import these items in large quantities, which of course impacts our trade balance and all. Becoming part of the high value-added activities of GVC is critical for Indian manufacturing, as products manufacturing in GVC, like I said, accounts for a huge share of the world trade in non-fuel manufactured products. So the question that begs an answer, the million-dollar question is actually, why does India not participate in GVC? Is it out of its own volition, or what actually hinders? The answer is that India cannot ensure quick export and import clearances. Now, why the requirement of faster clearances? Now, we should understand that what happens in a global value chain. Manufacturing of most of the technology products in global value chain actually a multi-stage process involving production collaboration among firms located in several countries, several geographies. And the components and sub-assemblies manufactured in one country is exported to another country for next stage of processing. And the manufacturing, could be stage-wise, could be sequential, or could be simultaneous. So this process repeats as the semi-finished goods, travel across the border several times at different stage of processing. So to ensure efficient production, the system binds all participation to just-in-time production and supply schedule. Now, this requires real quick export-import clearance at each stage, and that is where India falters. See, any delay at any port or customs may create disruption in the entire value chain in the subsequent stage of production and upset the entire schedule. And obviously, the defaulting firm in the country may risk being tossed out of the network in such a scenario. The message is very loud and clear. A country cannot think of participating in global value chain unless it has high quality customs and port infrastructure capable of faster export and import clearances. Fast entry and exit through port is a precondition to making such products. As delays, will disrupt, like I told you, the entire value chain. And that's the reason that countries like China, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Malaysia, they have all become technology product manufacturing nations and are part of GVC. Through quality trade infrastructure, India has so far not been able to, as it does not meet the benchmark for efficient entry and exit in most of the customers. A lot of issues that I'll discuss. So you see that while India's share in the global mercantile trade is almost 1.7%, its shares in these GVC items, like electronic, telecom, and high-tech products is abysmally low, less than 0.4%. I'll give you an interesting data, and I think you'll be surprised that India has a very weak global share in some of these commodities. Integrated circuits, our share is 0.01%. Mobile phone, 0.19%. LCD, 0.04%. Transistor, 0.14%. I mean, pathetic. So India's insignificant presence in these large basket products have become important, and these are infra-critical products which many countries produce. So India, now what do we export generally? You'll find that 70% of our exports basically target around 30% of the world trade, which are at the lower end of the value chain, which are tolerant of less efficient trade infrastructure. Say, like I'll tell you, our share in rice export is around 39%. Say, small diamonds around 20% or so, buffalo meat, shrimps, almost around 20%. So, because these are the items which are tolerant of less efficient infrastructure, there the time schedule does not matter. The cost is important. So even if there are delays, it doesn't matter much. Now the active participation. Now let me again reiterate that active participation in GVC global value chain is the only sure way of enhancing India's exports. And that GVC model has a basically smiley curve, and I would try to explain through that iPhone example. iPhone or Levi Strauss jeans, these are examples. Say like iPhone, what happens? US prepares the iPhone design and prototypes. The critical components and intermediates, say like integrated circuits or processors, come from Korea or Taiwan. And the final assembly takes place in China, where assembled. So at the higher end of the smiley curve are the companies which actually give intellectual capital. They put intellectual capital and earn the most. And then there are at the lower rung of the ladder is the country which assembles and get the least revenue out of it. Now, why is India out of GVC? Like we said, a poor trade infrastructure actually. One thing, the general perception is that poor trade infrastructure can only increase what you call transaction cost and time of export operation. But one doesn't understand that a poor trade infrastructure can not only create problem can only increase transaction cost. It can almost prohibit a country from participating in GVC, and that is precisely what has happened to India. Now, how do we resolve this problem? That is one thing. So I believe our policy initiative should be to target all the parts of the GVC smiley curve. Like what happens? See, in most of the GVC, you'll find that US, Germany, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, with its R&D expertise, occupy the higher end of the curve. But China, is always at the bottom where assembly takes place. So what India should do is, India should target all parts of the curve of selected products. Like the top end, because of its expertise in R&D, system design, and the low end of the segment of manufacturing to provide jobs, and the high right-hand section of the smiley curve on account of being a large market. So we should target all parts of the smiley curve of the GVC because we have, expertise in each of them. Then secondly, we should set up a national trade network to enable all export-import related compliances online. Have national single window laws, and so more than one time. So that's NT, and what it will do, it will allow all exporters to file all the information and documents online at one place. One will not be required to, interact with each individual agency, whether it is customs or DGFT or shipping companies or port authorities. So there has to be a inbuilt system intelligence which will route all the required information to the appropriate agency, and there should be a service agreement which should bind all the government agencies or even the private agencies to respond within 2-5 hours, so that the all solutions are available online in a seamless manner and end-to-end basis. So India needs this NTN, what we call National Trade Network, and that is something I believe which even NITI Aayog has of late advocated. And the most important thing that is required to be done for participation of GBC is to automate port and custom operation and allow green channel clearance for most of the consignments. We know that we have this risk management system in place, but I think there is a lot to be done right now. We need to match our turnaround time of the ships with the global best parameters. We need to shorten the queues, and influence transaction. I'll give you some data points. See, India's average time taken for border compliance, which means complying with the requirement of customs and port authorities and shipping lines, is almost 85 hours for exports and 307 hours for import. And you compare it with the OECD countries, where it is 12 hours and 9 hours respectively. Similarly, documentary compliance, our time for export and import is 58 and 65 hours respectively, as against the comparable figures for OECD countries, which are 3 and 4 hours. Our turnaround time, is around more than ships imports is around 2.5 days compared to some 0.97. So, there's a lot of improvement. There are a lot of improvements that require to be done. Trader interface requires urgent attention. We need to upgrade our production process. We need to build quality infrastructure. We need to create institutions to develop standards and set up globally accredited testing labs. So I think if we are able to take these small measures with right earnestness, I believe I'm fairly optimistic that India could get into global value chain, and perhaps that is the only way for India to make a quantum jump in exports. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thakur. I think that was well said, and that's a really great insight. And I think that's important for all of us, all the stakeholders, to work together in a cohesive way to resolve that issues. And as you rightly said, that is not just one part of this one. It's entire chain has to be basically improved. And I think we have worked as a DNB. We have worked with the government a few years back, where there was project to reach out to some 700 odd exporter importer in the country and understand what the pain they are going through in terms of when they export through those top major port in India. And many recommendations we had, and I think we have seen some improvement on that front as well. So I think there's a thrust, there's a increased focus of the government to improve this, from a factory gate to the port gate and beyond, and those infrastructure has been taken care of. It's not attracting global player, also making us competitive. But I think a lot more needs to be done. I think with that, there are from a company side, the government side, from a stakeholder side, that's fine. I think from a company side, I would ask one question to Mr. Mathur, to you basically as a follow-up piece, that is Indian company, or are Indian companies ready to reap this benefit, what we're talking about, in terms of the global value chain, or getting into this one, or they're still dependent on the government for the larger support? What is basically Indian companies' preparedness to harness this new age opportunity, what is coming in?
Well, good afternoon, Dr. Singh, and thank you. I think the answer is both yes and no. We have some of the leading champions companies in India which are exporting, having global share, like Mr. Thakur was mentioning. There is a big segment in India which is world-class exporters. They are really champions in their own sector, in their own product lines, and we should be justifiably proud of these champions who are really driving, propelling exports. They really don't depend too much on government. So they are able to manage. In spite of government, they have performed phenomenally well. I could, off the top of my head, mention, let's say motorcycle or two-wheeler exports. We are world champions. We can beat the best. In fact, we have beaten the best in the world when it comes to two-wheeler exports. We have captured global markets, and even now with the advent of EV, I'm sure that we will continue to capture the global market, literally with the product end to end. But like is the case, that is not the way forward alone. A lot of intermediary goods, the global value chain, where Indian companies are not willing to become a part of the global value chain because they see a massive opportunity in the Indian market itself. And they see an opportunity to get by lower standard of products. To be a part of the global value chain, you got to have international standards. Now, the problem is that over the last 7-8 decades, we have still not been able to get our standards set. So though there is the Bureau of Indian Standards and they're all ministries, state governments, still we are producing a large number of not very high-tech, low-value consumer items, but not to global standards. So that's where the effort of the entire SME ecosystem has to go. Please make your products to a global standard. Either we follow a global standard or we make those standards so high that imports in our country don't happen from other jurisdictions. So the challenge in FTAs and all has been that, India has been flooded by cheap goods. It is not really a question of cheap goods, but of having no standards, what are called the non-tariff barriers. So we need to get working industry by industry, commodity by commodity. So for all the 11,000 odd, there are nearly 11,000 product HS code categories. Each of these 11,000 categories may have 200, 300 products. So it's a huge matrix. There must be millions of products on which you have to have standards. The US market does not have tariffs literally at all, but they have standards for more than 7,800 of these 11,000 items. So even if it is, there is no tariff, you cannot export to US because your standards are low. Your standards don't meet up to what the US has laid down for its consumers to consume. So the problem is we don't talk about standards. We talk about tariffs, we talk about costs, we talk about logistics, we talk about all these things. But the bottom line is, even if you were to get very good interest rates, very good turnaround time in ports, you'll still not be able to penetrate those markets because the entire manufacturing base in India is not manufacturing to those standards. So efforts have begun, ministry by ministry, this work is happening. And for literally every product line, every product component, the country needs standards, whether they'll be set by industry bodies, and of course, they're all private sector industry bodies. They have to get together and agree on the standards. And then this transformation will occur that we will lead in setting the standards. And then other countries will not be able to dump low quality products in our markets just because there is free trade. Obviously you have to move towards that era, but you have to regulate by standards. So that conversation, I don't see happening at the industry level. That's where I feel Indian private sector needs a little more cajoling and pushing so that please get together, set up global standards, or at least approach over an incremental period, internationally accepted standards, set standards where there are none, and then drive the global value chain. So it's to your question, I think Indian companies are ready. They're more than ready. They're already performing very well. Literally, if government was to get out of the way, they could capture global markets. The time to export should be really drastically cut down. Time should cut down to imports. Yes, there are issues. We need to still have we cannot have porous borders with our neighbors, with other countries. But the bottom line is the PM Gati Shakti is exactly about all this. From the logistic cost of 14%, we got to bring it down to 9%. So this 5% cut in logistics is happening with the national logistics platform, which is coming up. 16 ministries, about 24 digital platforms. They'll get together. So a large number of infra projects will help that happen. It may take time, but of course, the logistic costs shall come down. They've already started coming down from 14%. Now I think the figure is about 12%. But there is still a gap there. But more critical in my mind is the need for very high standards going forward for Indian SME and mid-cap companies also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathur. I think that was great insight. And absolutely, there's no doubt that the concern today is infrastructure, concern today is logistic cost, and concern today is basically the time taken. And there was a lot of improvement happened, to be very honest. And basically, on the ground, we have seen this. We're talking to companies literally on a daily basis on this aspect, especially in the logistics space. In fact, we have just launched rail freight index with some of our partner, and that's basically indicate that logistic costs I've said to come down, and that's a great things happening, because that will provide some focus, some space to the company, so that at least they can focus on the second part, what you call, we just mentioned about the quality and the standard. Because when you're talking about that piece, I think the primary part has to basically let go, which someone is already managing, and that's happening, and we see that's happening. And I think you brought that point fairly, that standard and quality matters. Otherwise, you're not going to capture what we're talking about. The world have moved on, and we're still talking about 30-year-old product, 30-year-old standard, or 50-year-old standard. It's not going to work. So thanks for that insight. Now, with that, I'll switch to the other side of the equation, from India to, and I think you mentioned about some major cooperation happening across the various countries. And I saw Dr. Badrija joined. Welcome, sir. And I'm basically coming to you in terms of our next question is that how you see India is competing with other Asian markets for the trade within Asia, as we all know that majority of the countries have already joined the RCEP. And what is your viewpoint, Mr. Dr. Badri?
Thank you very much, Dr. Singh, and apologies for the delay in joining. I was in another meeting. But I completely agree with Mr. Thakur and Mr. Mathur on the various points that they raised. And they're also relevant for the question that you just asked me, because of course, RCEP is one of it's probably the largest multilateral or plurilateral trade deal. It involves a lot of countries in Asia and the Pacific, so one thing before getting into how India is going to deal with this is the various points that Mr. Mathur just mentioned. Even when we have a free trade agreement, even when we are part of a trade deal, it's going to be dependent. The benefits are going to be dependent on how much the companies are going to proactively pursue it, proactively get into the markets by improving the standards and quality. And when I have interactions with many importers in other countries and the governments and industry bodies, one thing they say is that there is often lack of interest or initiative from the industry itself. Like, even many times you don't need a trade deal to start the discussion, the negotiations in terms of exports, finding markets, and so on. So I think that there the industry has to be proactive, and that is also very related to what you asked now, because in the context of RCEP, obviously the members have got greater access to each other's markets. So here, we all know that RCEP is a relatively shallow agreement. It's not a very deep, comprehensive agreement. And I think probably Mr. Thakur may talk later about the trade agreements that we are signing, and some of them are quite comprehensive. So RCEP is more of a signaling agreement, where saying that we're all together, and of course the tariffs are reduced, so there is some market access thing, but at the same time it's not that comprehensive or deep. So in that sense, the gains from RCEP for each of our competitors, India's competitors there, are not tremendous, but they are significant. They are still considerable and significant. So in this context, how do we compete with them? There are many strategies. One, from the policy point of view, from the government's point of view, which is basically to proactively sign trade deals with each of the RCEP members. So we have been very close to being successful with Australia, for example, and I think that's also progressing well. And we already have agreement with ASEAN, so ASEAN is already there. With Japan also we have a great deal before. So we have covered many of the countries in RCEP already. The only major country we have not covered there is China, which is anyway a difficult partner, as we all know. So I think in this context, I think from the government point of view, we are doing the best in the sense that we are trying to get these trade agreements individually with the countries, and there are sectors where we can gain a lot by access to these countries, and there are sectors that are sensitive which are being taken into account in the negotiations. So that is the first aspect. Second aspect is the going back to the private sector initiatives. So I think that has to be there. We cannot avoid disruptions coming from the RCEP agreement itself, in terms of how these countries have got together. They have got greater market access. There is greater value chain integration, global value chain integration among these countries. So there are going to be a lot of spillover effects on us, and we have to be ready to face that. And long ago, we did a study on TPP and India, when TPP was in the making, Trans-Pacific Partnership. So one of the findings we had was that, okay, we are not part of TPP. We are not also part of many other bilateral negotiations at that point. This is before ourselves. What can we do then if we are not part of that? So what can we do as an industry, as a agglomeration of industries, is that we have to understand the various tenets of these agreements. What are the various standards that are coming up? What are the various institutional changes that are coming up because of these agreements in these countries? And how can we as a country, as a combination of many industries, how do we get ready for that? Because since these people have decided all these rules among themselves and we have not been part of that, it is quite possible that we may be some of these may be imposed on us indirectly, because many of them are our trading partners. I think that is where we have to work together and try to identify ways in which we can upgrade our systems, and all the points mentioned before are valid here: infrastructure, quality, and all those things. I think that's what I would say. What can we do as policymakers, and what can we do as industries? These two.
Thank you, Dr. Badri, and that was a good viewpoint. And I think we are all looking to capitalize this gain what we have already seen and from the signing. So let's see how future holds for all of us. That's great. Now, in that context, I think we've spoke a lot in terms of infrastructure, logistic performance. What I say in a nutshell, which basically World Bank is not talking about nowadays, basically ease of doing business, and government have taken various initiatives, ease of doing business across borders. And with that, I'll come to you, Professor Joshi, on basically government have taken initiatives, no doubt about this one. Out of all the schemes run for Indian exporter, which scheme you feel, you think, according to research or the data, that have benefited most to the exporters community? Because that's, I think, what we are talking about. So at least government can take a cue and move in that direction, that this is working, let's make it, or let's maximize that piece. Professor
Thank
Joshi.
you, Dr. Singh. You are asking a very, very tough question, that which one scheme is the best. Very difficult to answer, because no one scheme can be best. Rather, each of the schemes that we have got for export promotion, they supplement each other. And therefore, I cannot say that you have one scheme and you abandon all. So we need to have a mix of those schemes. And if you see that something which, again, if you see is probably best, is the Gati Shakti scheme. And why Gati Shakti is the... Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can.
Why Gati Shakti is, as you are aware, that there in India, what I feel is the exporters in India, they are very innovative. MSMEs are very innovative. They don't require incentive for the government, but they require what from the government is let them work and give them an ecosystem where they can function freely. Because if you see the innovation, innovativeness and entrepreneurship can only come in the private sector and the corporate sector, absolutely not in government. The task of government is governance and not business. There is no business of the government to do the business, and therefore what we require is to create an ecosystem. Now what is this ecosystem? One is the infrastructure, as you are aware. Now I'll give you a very small example. You talk of transportation, the cost of transportation of goods from Delhi, and I'll give you a better example from to port in Mumbai or Kandla. After partition, something which was going from Amritsar to a Karachi port, the port journey has become almost tripled. And now it increased the cost of the cost of transportation, shipping, especially in countries like China. 45 to 48% of the cargo flows inland waterways. Now India, after independence, our inland waterways river system is almost closed and rivers are dead. Now, one thing I think which we have done very recently in last 5-7 years is to revive this inland cargo system, wherein the cost of transportation in the inland waterways is say 1/6 to 1/8 that what cost take on the road transport. So these are small things. Now, if you see the Gati Shakti is probably one scheme which takes consideration of all modes of transport: air, inland transport, ship, road, rail, everything. Another thing is, it also, we also had that scheme of that Sagarmala kind of a scheme. Port, if you see the port infrastructure is very critical sector. I'll give you a very small example. Single place Jebel Ali in Dubai, the capacity, the turnaround capacity of vessel in Jebel Ali, Dubai is more than all, handling capacity of the port of India taken together. Then if you see the mother port like Singapore, Dubai, India, we do not have that. So infrastructure is one that scheme. But I think let me tell, because you have got a variety of participants. Another thing, I think the one wonderful scheme which has come is the PLI scheme. Now PLI is the production linked incentive. Earlier government thought that you give some incentive here and there, some duty concession, some tax rebate here and there, and export in India will boom up. It will never happen. And therefore, the PLI scheme is probably the first time a scheme where it has recognized a specific sector and those linked scheme have been given. So this is another one. And very important scheme which I think we have made it WTO compatible is the remission of duties and taxes on the export goods. This is RODTP. Now, under all the international, the international norms, you export the cost but not the duties. We had earlier various types of schemes. We have a scheme on duty drawback. We have certain schemes that earlier we have that CCS, cash compensatory support scheme. Now these schemes were not not compatible with the WTO, number one. And second thing was there was a lot of leakage and seepage in the whole system. So I'm very sure that these schemes are coming, especially the RODTP will also, protect the seepage and the big. One thing which is absolutely perfect scheme, and probably the first time the government has paid attention, I'm absolutely moved from this, is the export promotion effort goes to the district level never before. If you see the constitution in India, foreign trade is the function of the central government and not of the state government. The state governments are absolutely not worried about export so far. Now, if you see about export, for a chief minister in a district or a chief secretary of a district collector, they are worried about the burning problem in the district, which is poverty, the basic rural infrastructure, and absolutely export is no priority. Why they should? you are having very senior bureaucrat, you ask them, they will tell you the truth. This is probably the first time that we have involved the district. Now, earlier also, I think for last 20 years, we had SLEPC, State Level Export Promotion Council, headed by Chief Secretary. We also had a system, introduced a system where there was one export commissioner. You go to the state, ask who is the export commissioner. I am not mincing the word, wherein the export commissioner himself does not know that I am nominated as the export commissioner, because this task was given to the industries commissioner most of the time, who had absolutely no idea what about exporting. District commissioners, divisional commissioners, district collectors have absolutely no idea about export. This is probably the first time, probably the last year itself, wherein I think the government of India, we interacted with each of the district collectors. And not only this, now we, with this scheme of the one product, one district scheme, and the district level export promotion committees. The thing was very difficult. Now we are also collecting the data district level. Now India is a multicultural country, multi-geographical country. So, one scheme does not fit into. And I think you see into, there are certain, bottlenecks in implementation of various schemes that I will, not like to discuss here. But something is when the district administration, it is the district collector or the industries or the divisional committee, they understand the significance of importance, and they need to understand that to increase the economic standard of the people in the district, you need to export. I'll give you an example. Like in China, the secret of success in China was the export-led growth. And I think India, we have a long way to go. They have 14.5% share in the world, exports. India's share is 1.6%, 1.7%. So I think you need to understand, all those things. You also need to understand that, there is a German saying that, if everybody is going forward and you are standing still, you are automatically going backward. I'll give you an example. When India became independent, India's share in the world export was almost 2.56%. Today, India's share with all the export promotion measures and so many 27 export promotion councils, we brought it down to 1.7%. There was a time we brought it down to the India's share in the export to 0.4%. And China, whose share was 0.9% in 47, they have become the largest exporter in the world with 14% share. India, with a lot of hostility with China, China remains the prime source of import even today. So I think all these things need to be looked into, but I am very sure that the kind of the schemes which we have formulated in last 2-3 years, in case they are implemented properly, and I like to tell one more thing. Mathur Saab has raised a very important issue of the non-tariff barrier. Today, the secret of success in the international market is non-tariff barrier. Two things: improvement of the quality at the domestic level, but more than that, our fighting with the international organizations wherein these are created barriers in the whole market. India is the largest exporter of milk on the earth, but most of the major markets, our milk product you cannot export. They say that if you do not have milk by the captive dairy farm, it's unfit for us. And I think there are a lot of things that you can discuss. Cheddar cannot be manufactured in any part of the world other than the cheddar region of that. So I think all these things we need to look into a comprehensive fashion.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for such an elaborate version. And we are running short of time, and I'm conscious about this fact. I think there are few questions already started flowing in, and I think one quick, and I think Mr. Mathur, I'll come to you. There's a lot of things happening on this, and I just need your 1 minute answer to this one. And sorry for giving that timeline. Is that we're talking about many elements. We're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about the product and quality and standards. We're talking about, I think, Mr. Mathur talking about. So this question is to Mr. Thakur, sir. How are the Indian companies positioned to capture the increasing export share with regard to product quality and standard? So your answer within 1 minute, please. Mr. Thakur, that was to you. Sir, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Oh, you want this question to be answered in a minute?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll try and see. See, the point is, your question was regarding increasing exports with regard to quality standards.
Basically, how Indian companies are positioned to capture the increasing export share with regard to quality of the product standard. Basically, we're talking about that element.
Give me a couple of minutes. See. Recently, I think if you ever heard, our minister was on record he was exhorting industry members to basically adopt, the domestic and international. To study domestic and international quality standards, and he requested them to adopt quality standards voluntarily and happily, and build industry, in a manner to meet global quality standards. Now the question is whether Indian companies are really prepared and geared up to face this challenge. I mean, that's, like our earlier panel members have already spoken, that with the reduction in tariff barriers have been accompanied with a proportionate or more than proportionate increase in non-tariff barriers like regulatory compliances, safety, quality certifications, packaging, labeling, testing, and all that, TBT and SPS measures. So there is a synergistic relationship between standards and trade, and adherence to trade actually enhances the potential of trade, right? And it would signal quality to customers. It would reduce what we call information asymmetry. So, and high quality products in itself actually is the best advertisement of the product. So quality is the mantra. Now, point is whether Indian, and this is challenge not only of India. Exporters from most of the developing countries, they're increasingly feeling the pressure to conform to international standards. I mean, much have been achieved in some of the countries, but there's a lot that requires to be done. Now, where do we stand? See, we all know that made in India products, to be very candid, by and large, do not enjoy that great reputation in markets abroad. Unlike Japan and Korea, we all know that. We have had issues with traces of pesticides in some agricultural products, or illegal dyes or pathogens and all that. So we face these issues, with regard to compliance of standards. Government has done a lot of initiative, but whether we have a long distance to travel, and the major, the challenge comes from developed countries, I would say, because like European Union, it's a highly discerning market, and it presents, serious challenge in the area of sanitary and phytosanitary standards and technical standards. So there actually, we need to actually gear up. Indian farms basically need to upgrade production process and product quality to meet the requirements. We have been able to do to some extent, but whether we are able to really overcome it, I would say there's a long distance to travel. What government has done, I can briefly tell you, because the government's commitment is to basically convert India into manufacturing exporting hub, and that's only possible, like Mr. Mathur said, that unless we adopt standards and our standards are acceptable to the most discerning market, then only probably it will be possible. So what we require to do, and probably, there is a roadmap which we are moving on, that we need to establish more globally, accredited test labs, probably enhance capacities of Indian testing labs. We should sign, what you call MRAs, mutual recognition agreements with partner countries to basically accept our standards. Government has improved quality standards through quality control measures and standards and mark and all that. And we have, created a database for SPS and TBT measures, which are getting notified in WTO and member countries. So a lot of things are being done. But then, because increasingly, the developed world, they would create a rules architecture, and they would create a standard architecture manner that it will place a greater burden of compliance on India's manufacturing and services standards. So we need to actually meet that. And the challenge is that actually every line ministry in the government actually should identify their products. Each regulator should review its technical standards and identify the gaps, and then probably lay down realistic time frame for bridging these gaps. And also what is necessary actually is that we promote awareness about standards and regulations and conformity assessment procedure everywhere. Unless we do that, it would be difficult to penetrate the market of developed countries, and you know that our exports there to European Union and US is almost 30%. So I think even to retain that particular share, we need to gear up and work very systematically towards developing standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thakur, for such a short answer. And sorry for that. I think we are heading towards end of the session. Actually, we are already timed out, and there are many questions coming in, and I think there are a couple of things. Naina, if you want to ask, Naina.
Thank you, Dr. Arun Singh. In fact, I was listening to this conversation, and I have a lot of notes, which I think will be very helpful as key takeaways for our audiences. And I must say, we've been a lot of questions have been asked. It's been raining questions. So without further ado, I'll just ask the questions. The first question is from Mr. Paresh Desai, and this is for you, Mr. Mathur. The question goes like this: how can you throw light on how existing standards, which are similar to global ones, can be enforced? So they've written here, and I will just quote it the way it's written by Mr. Desai. Take IS for electrical goods, say bulb or tube lights or street lights, for example. Mr. Mathur, would you want me to repeat the question, or have you kind of?
No, I got the question, but I couldn't really understand what is he trying to say. So if there is an Indian standard which is not acceptable globally in other markets, so this is the mutual recognition agreements that Mr. Thakur mentioned. So you cannot force any other jurisdiction to accept your standards. But if there is an international standards, these are all issues of dialogue and discussions. And this is where the leveraging power of our country will come in play. So if there is a specific issue on tube lights and bulbs, that thing you may like to get your industry association to represent. And I'm sure the government of India will take it up very actively, including through our embassies. I think one thing we need to also acknowledge that over the last couple of years, the Indian missions abroad are really champions of exporters. So do reach out to the Indian missions, tell them your specific granular problems in a particular jurisdiction. If there is any discrimination to Indian goods in that country being exported, then do take it up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mathur. The next question is from Mr. Nitin Sahani, and he's not addressed it to anybody in specific, so anyone can take a stab at it. It goes like this: how does a payment system work? Means not even knowing the US. And how do we transact and settle the currencies? So I think what he's trying to say is that if we are working with countries like the US, and if we want to understand how to transact in these countries and settle the currencies, what would be the important steps that we would need to kind of be aware of? So I guess that's what Mr. Sahani means. Anyone can take a step. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
May I take a shot? I've been a banker. See, one of the things we could not cover in today's discussion is the trade finance. I think which was a very important thing which we missed out because other things, there were too many theoretical things we talked about. See, very granularly to your community, Dun Bradstreet, please reach out through trade facilitation on trade finance. See, the trade finance is the biggest problem. Standards are there, all those issues are there, but availability of trade finance is where our small SME exporters get trapped. The Indian banking system needs to be supported by our proactive exporters and through the policy so that the risks are also taken up by other jurisdictions. For example, if I'm an exporter in Sanganer, Rajasthan, Jaipur, and I'm exporting to Mongolia, and suddenly there is a buyer in Mongolia of Sanganeri print, but he gives me a letter of credit of the First Bank of Mongolia. Now, my bank in Sanganer does not know the First Bank of Mongolia and whether to accept an LC, letter of credit of that bank. So precious time will be wasted to transact that LC. There will be no confirming bank. It will take weeks maybe for a bank in Hong Kong to come in as a confirming bank. And then the Indian exporter from Jaipur can export to Mongolia. So a lot of trade from India is not happening on the LC. It is happening on what is called the open account. But this is a big tragedy. Bangladesh, a much smaller country than ours, is using 3 times the number of LCs to export. So how are we exporting? We are exporting on the open account. So please move to, when you are exporting to US, get your importer to give you an LC. They will typically say, no, we are a US importer. You send it to us and after 3 months we'll pay you. Don't fall into that trap. Insist on a letter of credit. We have to educate, we have to help, and the LCs, they got a typical language. So we need the government to help out. Now there are new platforms which have come up, very innovative platforms, which are helping in trade financing, because the bankers also charge a lot of money. I've been a banker myself, but I know sometimes when you export, you don't know what are the charges that the LC confirmation will end up. So you end up paying 6, 7, 8% of your entire cost just for the LCs. That is too high a cost. So please bring down the bankers' cost, work on LCs, don't do open exports.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mathur. This is really interesting, and I think all our exporters need to be very well educated on all these aspects, especially, and understand where these documents are placed so that they can kind of download it, read it, and come back and ask questions as well. Of course, we are running out of time. We've exceeded by about 13 minutes. We'll take the last 2 questions. So the second last question is, again, not addressed to anybody in specific. It goes like this. Is DSIR recognition to in-house R&D centers beneficial for global companies present in India for a cross-border business? If yes, how? Anyone can take a stab at it. Do you want me to repeat the question, sir?
Yeah, we can come back at that, and maybe we can reply it offline. And yeah.
All right. So the last question here now, which again is something that every Indian company could relate to, and I think this is very pertinent for us as well. Do we give more importance to the need of doing business across borders when we have a huge opportunity and market available in India? So this is from Ravindranath Sharma. And what are the areas where we should be doing business across the borders, and other than teach other nations about? So the second part is like incomplete, but the first part was quite interesting, saying that do we need to first focus on the Indian market and then build our capacities to move business across borders, or how is it? Like very interesting, but I mean, we would love to know your views. So yes, Professor.
I absolutely disagree with you, because it is not that you do the business within the country, because it's a absolutely not a good idea that you focus only on your country. If you see if you go to the international business or the across the borders, you have pressure to improve the quality, you have pressure to improve the process. And unless you go to the international market, you will fail in the domestic market itself. Now I'll tell you why. Because today you are buying multiple things, the multiple products that you are using. You are buying these products from foreign companies or multinational companies which are marketing across, right from a soft drink to a pen to a pen to the pencil. Why? Because the international market are absolutely unlimited from the firm's perspective, and it gives you opportunity to introspect yourself. Like we were talking of the standards, the quality standard. Unless you are an international market and you are selling in the domestic market, you have no pressure about the quality. You have no pressure about the systems. So I think it will bring efficiency to you. It will increase your profitability, and not only that in the international market, but your success in the international market will make you successful in the domestic market. Another thing that if there are the price upheavals in the domestic market, it will hedge against you, and therefore the beyond borders is probably one thing that would hedge against you. So I think don't fall into the trap of being confined to the domestic market. Don't close your door. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Joshi. In fact, I do have a smile on my face, because ultimately it's important for us to push ourselves to become more competitive in nature. And that's only possible if we move away from our comfort chair.
I'll tell you one
As
more thing. Why Dun Bradstreet is competitive? Because it's not a homegrown company. Because these people know how to operate across the border. Otherwise, you could have attended a seminar by the local chamber of business and commerce, and that would absolutely not given you the quality that I think this has given to you. Because they know how to do it. I don't want to tell you, because the government of India today also appoint the international consultants. Why? Because they have got cross country, the experience.
Best
I am
practices.
also involved in the restructuring of various government designs, and I think we work on that. So I think it's not a good idea. Thank you so much.
well, Professor Joshi, I would love to kind of agree to disagree on this, because after listening to all the panelists here, I really feel it should be the other way around. We should have our Indian, eminent personalities to act as consultants, because we as a country are very diverse, and I think we bring a lot more on board. And to work in a country like India is no easy cakewalk. So sorry, but be
No,
Indian
no problem. And this is because I was going through your brochure, and you have already written that your global chief economist comes only from India. So compliments to you, Saika.
Absolutely, and he's an Indian, sir. And he's an Indian, sir. Well, I must also, before I conclude, I must say that Dr. Arun Singh has, and rather has led this project. But on behalf of Dun Bradstreet, we've published a paper on the Ukraine-Russia crisis, and it is available on our website. So for all our exporters, please do download that copy and understand what it means for the Indian business, what it means for the global supply chain, and what are the key highlights, and moving forward, how, of course, it's dynamic. And I'm sure Dr. Arun Singh has really worked very hard on that. So please download your copy. But at the same time, more importantly, you have the Business Across Borders publication up live and it will be in your inboxes, ladies and gentlemen. So please do that. And without further ado, I would like to first thank all our eminent panelists, Mr. Thakur, Mr. Mathur, Mr. Narayan, Professor Joshi, and rather Dr. Narayan, my apologies, and Professor Joshi. And last but not the least, Dr. Arun Singh, thank you so very much. I was intently listening to all the discussion, and I'm only beaming with pride that we have such eminent personalities who give us the guidance, who are absolutely knowledgeable, and you all are the pride of our country. So thank you so much for taking time out from a busy schedules and gracing this event. Last but not the least, I would like to kind of thank you guys for all. Thank all of you. My apologies. Thank all of you for also orchestrating this entire session and making and giving us some brilliant takeaways. And before I move to the conclusion, the actual conclusion of the event, I would like to also tell everyone that your feedback is very important. Please do share your feedback. I hope you had a fantastic session and a lot of key takeaways. And of course, on our platform, we have a feedback feature, and you can share your comments and suggestions, and of course, your overall experience as well. I thank you again for all our partners for their invaluable support, without which this event wouldn't have been a success. Last but not the least, thank you, all of you, for participating at the event, all our dignitaries for taking time out from their schedules and making this a grand success. Thank you very much. This is Tena Acharya signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. Thank you again.